here's a Slingshot again. I've got the tabs on it, and I think this is called pseudo taper on the bands. Anyway, there it is. I'm going to take a couple shots with it, and when I'm shooting it, it looks like this. So I hold it in my hand fairly far forward and more on an angle. So anyway, let me make a couple shots with it. Fairly close because I'm not a good shot, but let's see what we can do with this thing. Maybe I can get one more hit. Oh, of course I miss. And I say that. There we go. We'll call it quits on that one. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the process that I use, you can keep watching the video. If not, that's probably the highlights of it. So cut it off there. And thanks for watching.
So again, here's the fork that I've chosen. I believe it's maple. All these I cut several months ago, and I just leave them sitting in a cardboard box in my garage, and then I throw them in my little kit once they're dry. I think it gives the wood more character if you let it dry naturally than letting it speed drying it. And even so, this one still may not have a lot of character just because of the type of wood, but we'll see what we can make of it. So now I just kind of hold it up and eyeball it, and then I use my saw, and I've got a what do you call it, a scroll saw. But I typically use this hacksaw more than anything. And I do plan on buying a coping saw. Actually, I plan on today as soon as I get out. So I don't recommend the hacksaw. But anyway, as you can see, I'm kind of eyeballing it to see what it'll look like if I chop those off there. And that's probably what tips are cut now. And they just need to be leveled up, especially if you use a crappy saw like I did. And you can take you some high grit sandpaper. Or not high, but low. The lower the number, the more cutting. So like some 60 or 80. Put it on a surface, flat surface, and just rub it back and forth. I actually have an orbital sander, and I'll probably go level them up with that. And the better you sand, you can see all the cuts, and you can't really see any grain in there right now. And the better you sand, you'll be able to pull the grain out, like on this one. Also, be careful, because more power is not always better. This is a frame that I decided to grab my saw and cut on instead of using the hacksaw, and you can see I just tore it up. So, you know, take your time. Don't get carried away. So I sanded the fork tips with the orbital sander. Again, it can be done by hand, but that just speeds up the process. Still haven't cut the handle length yet, and now I'm just going to take my carving knife and slowly strip the bark off. You got to be careful on these small size frames because one little miscut and there's not much wood to work with, so that's all I'm going to do. So now you're just at a part where basically experience and personal preference comes in. So you can see I just barely stripped the bark. You have your more white wood, and then you have the bark. Since this bark is not flaky, I went on and left most of it on, or what I would consider the underlayer of the bark. I'm going to leave it on because the wood up under it is white, and I like the linseed oil finish, but if your wood does not have a lot of character, then it's not going to enhance it a whole lot. So this right here will probably stain up pretty dark. Notice I still haven't cut the handle yet. This gives me more surface to hold on to while I'm working with the piece of wood here. But anyway, what I'm going to do is probably cut this part off. It does feel pretty good in the hand, but I can get some character out of the wood by removing that. So I'm just going to hit it with the orbital sander, and then I'm going to come back with some heavy grit sandpaper and take off some of this wood to try to start bringing the grain out better. And I'll come back. At this point, these are all the tools that I would have needed to use. I did mention that I used the orbital sander just to speed things up, but I only used it to knock down the little hump that was there, and then to smooth these out. But you can always cut them and then take them and rub them across the paper. So a hacksaw, the carving knife, and scraps of sandpaper. Since I want this slingshot to be like a little 3-finger shooter, I'm just going to kind of measure it, and I figure that I'll probably cut it off right in that area. So it's going to be a mini pocket shooter, little pea shooter, but they can still be pretty powerful slingshots. So at this point, I sanded from 80 to 100 to 220 to 320. And that's where it stands right now. There's a few things that I think separate a slingshot from, you know, a nice looking slingshot, although it may be really simple, from just a twig with rubber bands on it, or a Y fork with rubber bands on it. And part of that is the finish. So spend a lot of time sanding and get it sanded down really well. The only thing that I didn't show is how I do the tops here. And I'll take, say, like the 100 grit paper, and just kind of hold it at an angle and go around just to smooth the tops out. That's the only thing I've done up to this point. Now I'm going to cut the end off, sand them down like I did here, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. The only thing I've done differently is I hit it with a little bit of 400 grit sandpaper, and this is pretty much what we've come up with. So I like to, there it is, what I like to do is go inside, wash my hands really good, and then take a clean dry rag and wipe the slingshot off. And how you finish the slingshot, see, I'm filling it over and there's a little bit of a spot there that I don't like the way it feels, so you get the 400 grit paper again. Just a little bit. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so just for simplicity purpose, I'll take and put Slingshot down in a bag. This is a boiled linseed oil. It's gonna be a mess. Try to open it here, obviously. There we go. Just put a couple of glugs down in there. There we go. Now, close this thing up. I like to try to get as much of the oil, the air as I can out of the bag. Seal it up. There we go. And now, every time I walk by it, I'll put this inside, and every time I walk by it for 3 or 4 hours, I'll just try to turn it around and make sure it gets coated good with oil. Okay, so this is where it all starts to come together. I have 400 paper, 600, 1000, and 2000. Now, I've just taken this out of the bag. It's been in for about 6.5 hours, and what I'm going to do is, I guess what I call oil sanding. You could probably call it wet sanding, something like that. But this is a wet or dry sandpaper, and I'm going to start with 400. That's where I sanded it last when it was dry. So I just have a heavy coat of oil on it, and I just take a little scrap of this sandpaper, and I'm just going to sand it, okay? You don't have to do too much here. And the key is to sand it with the 400, then wipe it off good, something disposable, wipe it off good, then put it back in the bag, get more oil on it, do that with the 600, wipe it off good, get more oil on it, and then when you get to the 1000 and 2000, you're more or less just polishing, you're not cutting anymore. I'll cut the video and then I'll show you when I get finished what it looks like. Alright, so I'm finished with the sanding, and what I've done here is, like I mentioned, just sand it all the way up to the 2000 grit sandpaper. And all that needs now is a good wipe down. I'm going to clean up the mess. Be careful if you use the linseed oil. Sometimes it's been known to just combust, get on fire randomly. So I like to discard all of this stuff in a container that's not going to endanger burning your house down or something. One thing that I will mention as far as a tip about the sandpaper, because this higher grit paper is a lot more expensive, what I like to do is when I'm washing my hands, I'll put a little bit of soap on the paper and wash the paper off as well. It's wet to dry paper, and it'll dry right up. I keep this paper separate from my normal sandpaper, and I just use it over and over and over again. After this, after you wipe all the oil off of it, if you want to let it sit overnight, then you can come back, and I use this gunstock wax. I'm going to experiment with some beeswax, but I just use the gunstock wax, and I do the same process, except I use the highest grit paper, and I just rub it down, and then I polish right over it with the gunstock wax. It gives it a nice good feel. So it's time for a photo opportunity after I clean up. So now you want to show off your work. It's time for a photo. I usually like to get a photo before I band it up. That way you can see all the grain and everything. Anyway, I think this is where most people go wrong. Not that it affects the craftsmanship of your work there, but showing it off, displaying it, you can really tell a big difference, and I'm going to show you why. So it's the mid-afternoon, and check that out, sun, boom, glaring. Okay, that's going to be horrible for taking a photo. So I'm going to wait till the sun goes down a little bit and we get some softer light. This is called hard light, when you're squinting and everything else. But that's kind of how your photo is going to turn out as well. So we need to wait till we either have softer light or we get into a condition where it is softer light. Okay, so you see the sun is fading away in the distance now, and I've about let it get too far down. There's still plenty of light, but I'm not really seeing any good spots in my yard to take a photo. Let's go up here. Okay, I got some pretty good ones the other day right over here. Maybe we'll go here. Sorry, we're just going all over the place. So, try to give you an idea of what I'm doing here. With the sun being in that direction, we should be able to get some blue tones from the sky that direction. I don't think any of these shots will line up good though. But anyway, here's one we can get a little bit of sunlight in. So, I like this because we can focus in there. Okay, and then here was one last photo, and what I did here was I just, put it on the edge of the deck. My grill's over there, so I was just trying to frame it up as this being the photo. So maybe if it'll blow the background out good enough, then it'll look pretty cool. I don't know, we'll see how it turns out. Okay, I really didn't find any other good spots to take a photo, but I'll show you. That's the photo I just took in that direction, and somebody else can explain it, but to get the blue tone in the sky, the sun has to be, I think it's in the opposite direction, and it has to be low on the horizon, and everybody likes to see a shot of the slingshots kind of in your hand as a comparison. So I just held it up and I really took a picture about like that right there, and I'll crop it to where my hand's on the side. And the reason that I did that is, one, I get the sky in the background, and then I get a bit of a border at the bottom of the image. So essentially you're framing the image by getting a little bit of tree line and a little bit of the roof, so it's a natural frame in the image. Anyway, that's enough about taking the pictures, and yeah, we'll see how they turn out.